Hello and welcome back to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and it's time for another innovator interview in which we talk with the people and organizations taking action to end the climate crisis. And obviously, there are a lot of different actions that we need to take. Today, we're going to talk about the future of the supply chain for food and how it can be more regional and sustainable. Shoppers are shifting some of their purchasing to foods grown nearer to home and are abandoning traditional packaging for environmentally responsible alternatives. Our guest today, Stephanie Hughes, recently launched Raw Bulk Foods Online, an Australian source of zero waste foods delivered from the farm to the customer's door. As Stephanie puts it, we exist to clean up the planet by delivering your everyday pantry items direct from Aussie farms to your door, minus all the junk. It's a great idea to get rid of all the junk, and it's a good idea to buy foods locally because the carbon footprint associated with that is much lower. Now, while this is not a sustainable choice for U.S. shoppers because shipping food overseas would erase any environmental benefits, Raw Bulk Foods Online is another model for regional approaches to augmenting our food supply. Stephanie's team spent a year developing the production and packaging processes they use, which includes a refill program that eliminates single-use waste before they funded their launch on Kickstarter just a couple of months ago. Raw Bulk Foods Online raised $43,550 in backing, and they only needed $7,335 to start shipping food this coming June. So this is a startup with some momentum, and we wanted to learn more. You can explore what Raw Bulk Foods Online offers at Raw Bulk Foods Online, all one word, no spaces, no dashes, rawbulkfoodsonline.com. Welcome to the show, Stephanie. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. It was interesting. We've exchanged some mail about your project, and I watched the Kickstarter campaign roll out, and you did great. Let me ask this kind of general question first. Why is a regional solution to bulk food the right scope for a business to be more environmentally responsible?
Yeah, I suppose bulk food stores over the years I'm not 100% sure about the US, but have started to get some momentum in the fact of single-use plastic. And I think it comes from the concept of actually if we can buy in bulk rather than a lot of single-use tiny packets that are, used for seconds and thrown away,
right,
then it eliminates obviously the single-use plastic waste. So I suppose that's where the idea of raw bulk food started, is actually if we could take this concept but put it online for access to everybody, and they didn't need to live near a store, then it would mean that obviously it's going to cut down on all of that single-use plastic waste. So I suppose that's where it started to come from, is that idea of saying, actually, if we can take bulk food stores and make it accessible to everybody within the country that we live to, no matter what their location is, without having to live near a store, then it's going to have a massive impact. But I think that the actual solution to zero waste is far bigger than actually just a bulk food store. And I think that that's something that we uncovered as we started to look at this concept and say, actually, it's not just about bulk food buying, so much more than that. It's all about changing the whole supply chain. So I would probably say that bulk food store is so much more, if you're making sense, there's so much more to it than actually just bulk food buying, I think. And I think that that's what we have really done, is not just be a bulk food store. That the concept kind of existed over the years, but actually changing the whole supply chain as well, of what do we source from the farm right to when it ends with the consumer. What does that whole supply chain look like?
So what kind of products can somebody purchase through Raw Bulk Foods Online?
Your everyday items, so your every dried good that you can think of, basically. So we took the top 80% of what people buy, so like your rices, your spices, your pastas, your mueslis, anything like that. Basically anything that's not fresh produce, but your dried produce, that is what we stock. We've got just over 260 products that we stock.
So going to the question about what's sufficiently local to be environmentally responsible, what do you think the maximum distance this kind of dry goods should be shipped to prevent unnecessary emissions and waste?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that one, because I don't think there's a really a right answer to that, and I don't think I'd be in a position to answer that either, to say like it would be X amount of, you guys think working miles, but X amount of miles or X amount of kilometers that it should travel. However, I do think that just from a common sense perspective, that if we have something that's being grown on our doorsteps, or for example rice, then it surely makes more sense for human health and environmental health to eat as local as possible. And I think that that's one of the things that I found when I started to say, actually, what do we grow here on our doorstep rather than what are we importing? And the statistics scary. I mean, we was exporting more rice than we was exporting more rice than we actually consume. And that was a question I had to ask myself, why are we exporting more than we consume? Because we've got enough rice here to feed our own people in this country, but we're actually exporting all of this, and then we're buying it back at a cheaper rate from a different country, which was actually a lower quality rice. So yeah, in answer to your question, I don't think there's an actual number that I could put onto that. What do I think the maximum is? But just from a common sense perspective, we know that if we're going to take rice, for example, thousands of k's around the world before it lands on our plate, and repackage that, 4, 5, 6 times, which is what's happening, then the environmental effect of that is just astronomical.
So when you think about the mix of fresh produce and other foods that one purchases, some of which can come from local sources too, and the dry goods, how do you suggest shoppers supplement their local fresh purchases with raw bulk foods in order to, particularly to avoid food waste? What's the right way to think about creating your own regional diet?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think fresh produce is fundamental, and that makes up a huge amount of your diet. But I think pantry staples, well, we know actually, not just think, we've seen from the starts, pantry staples have been a big part of our diet for hundreds, thousands of years. So, even if we just look for, homemade bread, for example, it's made with flour and salt, two of the items that we stock. So I suppose it's like any meal. It's about making a balanced diet. And, if we're going to make a pasta dish, for example, don't make a pasta dish that's in a packet that's pre-made in a shop. Get the pasta from us that is fresh, because it is a dried good, but it's not being sprayed or preserved with, harsh chemicals or any chemicals in that fact to make it last. Get the pasta from us and supplement them with your fresh herbs, maybe some coriander and some fresh vegetables in it, and make your own tomato sauce rather than buying it out of a jar with some fresh local tomatoes when they're in season. And I always say to all of our community that we're growing that, check out your local farmers markets. We've been doing our shopping at farmers markets for years on end. So yeah, sorry, in answer to your question, I wouldn't say that there's a ratio, but I think that if we make any balanced diet, and if we balance a plate, there is always staples present, some form of dried goods, even if it's just the spices, for example, in a vegetable dish that have come from the pantry.
Now, one of the interesting elements of your offering is you provide a set of glass jars. They're very attractive, and they come filled with dry goods. And then you have a resealable bag that customers return to get refills to refill the jars. Can you tell us about the sequence of purchasing? Do you always have to start with the jars, or could you just order the refillable bag to begin with?
No, you can just do the refillable bag. So even on our Kickstarter campaign, one of the options was just a refill shop, because we do appreciate that over the years, people have, collected jars for years. There's a lot of jars where people buy goods. I mean, I've done it myself. You wash it and you keep the jar to eliminate waste. So yeah, if you already have a pantry that, you've got well stocked with your jars, you can just start from basically just buying your pasta within the refillable bags or your muesli, whatever it is. But funny story about the refill bags. When we actually started this, just short of 12 months ago, we actually started with plant-based bags to start with. And in our testing phase, we were shipping all over Australia to rural locations where we said, well, Australia is vast, a bit like America, it's huge. So are we going to be able to get the ingredients to these places?
Sure.
And the ingredients turned up absolutely great. But what we realised is the strong flavours. So say, for example, you had curry powder in these plant-based bags and against muesli, for example, there was permanent in the plant-based bags onto like your muesli or pasta. So I think I shipped to a friend, which is 4 hours away in Australia. And she had made a bowl of her cereal in the morning and it tasted of curry. So that's just one of the things of what led us to the refillable bags the way that they are, because we had to trial 3 different kind of bags just to see which one would be the best one to be able to keep the produce as in good quality as possible and the flavours intact, I suppose.
So the bag you settled on, what's it made of, and is it recyclable once you have worn it out?
Yeah, so our bags are actually made from recycled bottles and 20% ocean trash plastic.
Okay.
So it's reusing the plastic that's in the system. Because, I mean, plastic, there's a lot of information about plastic, and we see it so often where we may see, turtle swimming along. I think we've all seen that picture with a plastic bag in the mouth, and it's a horrific sight for us to see. I mean, plastic genuinely isn't a terrible material. It's just being used very incorrectly, in my view. It's very, very durable and it's made to last a long time. And that's the problem. It wasn't made to be used for a few seconds and thrown away, which is what we're seeing. So when we was obviously having a look at a solution, and we tried a lot of different bags, and they just didn't work and they wasn't fit for purpose. That's how we come to this solution of saying, actually, let's use the plastic that's already in the system, that already exists today, and pull plastic out of the ocean to reuse as well. And we know it's going to be durable because that's what plastic is. It's an extremely durable material.
And I assume that when you see that a bag is approaching the end of a useful life, that you just replace it. So you're also collecting the bags and sending them for recycling?
Yes. Well, we'll collect them and try and reuse them. So we'll collect them at the end of it and then try and reuse that plastic. I mean, we don't anticipate that being, every year or so. We anticipate that being a long time because, again, what we say, it's a very durable material. They last for 500 plus years without breaking down plastic. So it's not a material that we see that's going to have a really short life expectancy. But I mean, I'm not going to pretend that that's not going to happen, because there's going to be points where bags do get worn, but we're going to have our hands on them at that point, because they will be sent back to us to then say, actually, let's send these to the factory that we work with and reuse these to create new bags again. So the actual material just keeps getting reused over and over again.
Well, and I think that's one of the advantages of this kind of program, is that you do essentially take ownership of the materials that you're using to ship the food to the customer. Where does the refill process take place? Is it on a farm, as I said at the beginning? And when somebody receives a bag, are they going to get the same bag they sent in, or do they get just any bag? Which, raises some health concerns for some people. So sorry to ask so many questions at one shot, but that I think is the kind of question that our listeners are most interested in.
No, it's an absolutely great question, and it's a question that we had a lot as well from our own community. So the first question, the refilling process doesn't happen on the farm, as we're working with about 40, I think it's 42 different providers and farms. So we bring that we're actually based on Sunshine Coast in Australia. So we have a unit here on the Sunshine Coast, which is where the refilling process will take place. We source from the farms with bags that we've made ourselves as well, because again, that was something else that we realised within the supply chain was also built on single-use plastic. It weren't just the consumers, it was actually getting them ingredients from whoever you was getting them from. So we send our bags to the farms, they fill them, we get them here then at the Sunshine Coast, and that's where we refill the bags. The second question is an absolutely great question, and we've had that so often about how will I know that I'm getting the same bag? You don't, in answer. That would be a logistical nightmare, I think, for us to be able to control. But we're working with a third party cleaning facility that basically uses machinery that we've got here in Australia to clean them to a food grade standard. So as in fact of there being health issues, that would be eliminated in the fact that our bags are clean to brand new every time we reuse them.
Food grade level of cleaning.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other thing I noted is that your process is carbon neutral. How do you achieve that? And I guess the other question that comes with it is, are you going to be reporting on your carbon impact to customers in detail in the future?
Yeah, fantastic. So we've been working with a sustainable accountant from the day that we basically started with this idea, more or less. I'm really lucky that my brother's a chartered accountant and has been for a lot of years. So he helped very early days until we started to work with a sustainable accountant here in Australia. And he's very much helped us be calculating our projections of actually what initiatives do we need to do. I'm not a big believer of offsetting, and I know that offsetting over the years has gone huge. But I do believe as well, there's a level of offsetting that's always going to happen to maintain that you are going to be carbon neutral. But I also see a lot of business being done wrong over the years and then saying, yeah, but it's okay because we offset it. So I believe in not creating it, and then the tiny bit that you can't, that you need to offset on, that's what offsetting should be, not the fact that we pump all of this into the environment and then it's okay because we pay thousands.
Yeah, it's a Band-Aid. We don't need more Band-Aids. We need actual carbon neutrality. So roughly how much of your business needs to be offset at this point? Is it significant, or do you find that you're already pretty close to carbon neutral?
Yeah, no, very, very small amount of it needs to be offset. I mean, our full warehouse is powered purely off solar. Our deliveries, we're utilising electrical vehicles where possible. Our ingredients, as in terms of how far it's travelling, very minimal. We're sourcing as locally as possible. So we're doing every step within our own operation to ensure that our footprint's as small as possible. But like anything, we've all seen that phrase, any purchase that you buy has got some footprint. But yeah, it's very, very minimal that needs to be offset, to be honest. We're more interested in looking at ways in which we can minimise our own carbon emissions in our operations, and then saying, actually, we've only got this, I'll take it for 2%, for example, of what we do. What initiatives can we do to ensure that we're carbon neutral?
And so obviously there's a lot of progress to be made around you that you're going to be able to take advantage of too. The infrastructure will become more sustainable, and therefore that lowers your footprint as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our big goal is as well to actually be able to start giving back as well. So not just be carbon neutral, but being actually saying, we make less of a footprint on the planet than what we're generating. So that's our big goal. We're a startup. We've just started, and I think as things unfold, we're going to see more and more. But I think for us, it's absolutely fundamental that we continue to work with our sustainable accountant and just keep having a look at saying this is what the business looks like. This is how it's evolving. The bigger that we go, that's something that we need to continue to monitor and manage and say, we're growing, so we've got to keep our heads close to the numbers as well, and ensure that we carry on providing what we said we would do. We're doers, we're not just talkers.
Well, everybody should be that way. So let me ask this. I was intrigued by your Kickstarter startup. What did you learn from launching on the crowdfunding site Kickstarter? And do you consider it a good path to market for small companies that want to reach customers immediately and fund their company?
It was a big learning curve for me, to be honest, and I'm glad that you asked that. Australia's such a small market for Kickstarter. I think it's like 2% or something like that. It's very, very small, and I think that crowdfunding within Australia is very immature still. And that for me was a big learning curve, because from Kickstarter perspective, we didn't really get any support whatsoever. So we got Project That We Love, which was a real big badge of honor, I suppose, from Kickstarter. But from a revenue perspective, all of the revenue that was generated and the customer base was done purely from our own efforts. So yeah, in answer to your question, I think for a US company, absolutely amazing Kickstarter, because you have such a strong Kickstarter community that wants to back projects in the US. But from an Australia business, I found it very tough, if I'm being totally honest, because there was just no real Kickstarter community here in Australia. So not only was we obviously driving the traffic ourselves, building our own community, we also had to educate Australians about Kickstarter as well. And that was tough, because we were educating them about our business and educating them about actually what's Kickstarter. And the majority of backers that backed our project was all first-time backers on Kickstarter as well.
Interesting.
So yeah, and I mean, that's something that we all learn things in business, and that's one thing that was a big challenge for me and my team, because for example, we ran ads and we drove people through to our campaign, and our drop-off rate was huge, absolutely huge, with no backers. And we were saying, how can this be possible? Because we got all of these leads and, but nobody's purchasing. So we turned them ads off for conversion and started just getting leads again. And that's when we realised that people didn't understand Kickstarter, because when we was warming them up, so we were putting them into a leads funnel and then sending them 3 or 4 emails explaining what Kickstarter is, why we're doing it that way. Then there was going on and backing. But we got very, very, very minimal support from Kickstarter, and we got hardly any backers through Kickstarter community, because we just don't have it here in Australia.
So in some sense, Kickstarter just became a transaction mechanism and nothing more. You had to do all the work.
Yeah, completely, which is really hard, really frustrating for a new business. But when I did all my research around what is the best crowdfunding platform here in Australia, Kickstarter is the top one. So I just think that we just are probably, Australia with a lot of things, sorry, Australian people, because I might offend somebody, but we are a little bit behind the rest of the world with a lot of things. So I do just think that maybe crowdfunding just hasn't got to the stage where it's got to in the UK or the US, for example. I think it will do, but I do think that we're probably 5 years behind the US and the UK in terms of using crowdfunding platforms.
But nevertheless, you raised more than 5 times as much as you needed. You also, and you did that by doing a lot of surveying and understanding consumer preferences before you launched the campaign. How did you do that research and create the messaging that you used to achieve that outcome?
Yeah. Well, Facebook is the best tool that there is for advertising, collecting surveys, leads. So that's what we did. So we did a lot of local surveying in my local area on the Sunshine Coast. But we used Facebook to do surveys through ads as well. And it was very, very simple questions that we asked around, what people felt about single-use plastic. If there was a better solution, would they use it? How did they feel? Where did they feel the most amount of waste come from within their life? And it was just very simple questions, just to understand if there was a market, because everybody's got the next best idea, hey? So we did that right at the beginning of saying, is there a market? Because we can feel passionately about saving the environment, but we need an army of people, and we need thousands of people doing a little bit if we're going to make this change. So we did that right at the beginning to understand that was people aware, or did they just live in this bubble where actually single-use plastic had just become such the norm, nobody even realised. And if there was a better solution, would people be open to it? So we did that right at the beginning, and then we understood actually it was overwhelming. 93% of people, I think, from the top of my head, said that if there was a better solution, they would opt for it. It was an overwhelming sense of feeling that people didn't have the options. And for us, we was at that position saying, well, surely if we can give people that option, then they're going to opt for it, because people are aware of it and people do want to make change, but they don't feel that they have the capacity to do that.
Well, and it's certainly the people who are listening to the show right now are in that camp and are looking for these kinds of solutions all the time. You start shipping food on June 3rd of this year. Did the big outcome on Kickstarter surprise you, and are you ready for that additional demand? Or how's the launch going to go?
Yeah, I would be lying if I didn't expect it to be big. I set up the business to be a real player in the market. I wanted to contend with the major supermarkets. And I remember when I said that right at the beginning, people laughed at me. Said, "Oh, Steph, just start with a little small business." I'm like, no. If we're going to do this, we really need to make a big impact. So the business has always been set up to be able to deal with high demand, right from the beginning, from day one. That is what I set out to do. So the demand, I personally thought we would do more on Kickstarter than what we actually did. And that was just a secret little feeling for me. But like I said, what we're seeing is that there was a lot of the community that joined us. I mean, I think we ended with 13,500 leads, I think we're on as of today. And people that have said, just put in their email saying, yeah, I want to shop this way, I'm interested, because we didn't offer anything. That's kind of just the question that we asked. So Kickstarter actually worked against us in some ways, because people didn't know what to do on Kickstarter. So yeah, the demand wise, right from the beginning, we always set up to be a major player in the market, to say we want to contend with the big supermarkets. So how do we make sure that our foundation is strong enough? And we have the capacity that we don't fold under pressure. And that's the way that the business was built. Right from the beginning, we built on big figures. We built on very big figures around saying, right, what is our goal in the first year? And that's what, I don't know if you saw on Kickstarter, but we said our goal in the first year was we wanted to stop 6.5 million single-use plastic packets going into production. So if you just do the maths of that, I mean, that's 12,500 Australian households shopping with us for a year. And that's the way that we started. Then that is our big number. That is our number that we want to reach.
And it's interesting. So that's roughly the ratio of residents to grocery stores in many communities that I've looked at. So essentially, you want to launch a successful single grocery store and expand. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are thinking about launching this kind of regionally focused food company?
To know your numbers.
Okay.
I think for any, I've been asked this question so many times, not just about a regional store, but with any business. I think when you look at environmental businesses, you can get so passionate and so caught up in the purpose, I suppose, of what you want to do. But I think that you've got to know the numbers, and you've got to know that within your community, there is a demand there, because, you know, some communities, depending on where you live, change, you know, they vary community to community. And even though we know that this is the way that shopping has to be, and I've said that over and over again, you might have heard me on some other things, but I always say this will be the norm. Like, if you're not doing this now, you'll be doing it in 5 years, because this is the only way that shopping can go. But communities take longer depending on what area they are in. So I think you've got to know your numbers, and you've got to make it accessible and affordable as well. So know your community that you're sat in, do your surveying, get to know what really matters to them people in your community as well, for in terms of your messaging, how you get them to change from maybe them going to the local major supermarkets at the minute, and how you get them to make that change, because it is a change. And I think you've got to understand that for people, the majority of people don't like change. So just do your surveying, know your market, have a chat to them, get to know what matters to them, what's important to them. And I think once you've got that, then you can start to put a bit of a strategy together around, how do I launch within my local community, and how do I message this to people? How am I going to relate to them? And I mean, one of the biggest things for us, overwhelming, that we got is that these and we got this so often, these eco solutions or environmentally solutions that are saving the planet are great, but I can't afford it. And we got that thousands of times. You know, these solutions are always expensive. And I think that we've got to understand that people sometimes want to make the change, but they don't feel that they can afford to, because all of these solutions are more expensive. And me, myself, being a very conscious consumer for years, I can back that, and I can say that is usually always the case.
But you did get a result. You got a result for that additional expense that you're trying to bring to everybody. And that's one of those, first steps in the march of progress kind of courageous moments that people have to take. And I congratulate you on having done so. I know our listeners in the United States would like to learn more, just to understand what they are doing, what they can do. But for our listeners in Australia, where can they get started with raw bulk foods online?
Yeah, so you said we actually haven't finished our Kickstarter. We've got 6 more days left on it. So you can still head to our Kickstarter for 6 more days. After that, we will be online, which is www.rawbulkfoodsonline.com. And on there will be our whole product range as well. What we're stocking, over 260 products, and you'll be able to start purchasing. We will still be we don't actually start shipping until the 3rd of June, but we will be turning our website on after the next 6 days, where people can pre-order directly to us then as well, which we think we'll have a huge demand of, because we've got a lot of people that just don't want to back through Kickstarter because they don't understand it. So within 6 days, you'll be able to come directly to our website as well.
Great. Well, in fact, we're recording this a few days before the show will go live. So that 6 days, folks, will point you to Raw Bulk Foods Online. Stephanie, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed our chat.
Well, thank you. We've been talking with Stephanie Hughes. She's the founder of Raw Bulk Foods Online. It's an Australian source of zero waste dry goods. And we encourage you, if you're in the United States, to take a look and see what they're doing. Think about launching something like that here. I know there are a variety of stores, but a shipping program is an interesting innovation. You can find out more about Raw Bulk Foods Online at Raw Bulk Foods Online. All one word, no dashes, no spaces, rawbulkfoodsonline.com. This is Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. We, of course, will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, please take a few minutes to share this podcast and others of the more than 270 that we have done with your friends, family, the neighbors' dogs. Maybe they'll tell somebody. But if we get more ideas out there, we can create less waste. And that is the path to sustainability. This is Earth911. We're going to be back soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.